On the night of June 5, 1944, just before midnight, a C-47 transport aircraft shudders as it crosses the English Channel. Inside, a paratrooper from the 101st Airborne tightens the leather straps around his right boot. Secured there is a knife, lightweight, utilitarian, with a carbon steel blade just under 7 inches long, a stacked leather grip, and a simple steel guard. It is cheap, unremarkable, and mass-produced, and it will save his life twice. First, after a bad landing when he ends up tangled in a tree and uses the blade to cut himself free. Later, in a barn near St. Margles, when an enemy soldier bursts through the door and there is no time to unsling an M1 Garand. The paratrooper reaches down, draws the knife from his boot, and drives it upward in one smooth motion. The steel does exactly what it was made to do. The enemy falls without a sound. This knife was never meant to exist. It was a compromise, a wartime stopgap designed to be fast, cheap, and disposable. It was produced by 9 different companies across the United States, none of them renowned knife makers. Yet by August 1944, more than 2.5 million had been manufactured, more than any other fighting knife in American military history. Paratroopers strapped it to their boots, Rangers slipped it into their web gear, tank crews kept it within arm's reach. Even Britain's Special Air Service, among the most elite units in the world, chose the American M3 over their own legendary Fairburn Sykes dagger. In the field, the American knife proved tougher, more reliable, and brutally effective. This is the story of the weapon no one asked for, but everyone needed. A blade so practical that it replaced every previous American trench knife design. A tool that cost less than a modest dinner and outlasted the war itself. In December 1941, just one day after the United States entered the war, Washington was flooded with mobilization orders. Rifles, ammunition, helmets, boots, bayonets, everything was suddenly in short supply. In the basement of the War Department, an ordnance officer opened an old filing cabinet packed with First World War surplus records. Inside, he found what he was looking for: Mark I trench knives from 1918. They were more than 20 years old, still wrapped in oiled paper, sitting in arsenals from New Jersey to California. The officer made a call. Issue them. Airborne units first, Rangers second. No one argued. The Army needed fighting knives, and there were not nearly enough to go around. The K-bar had not yet entered production, and the British Fairburn Sykes was not an American design. Through 1942 and into early 1943, the Mark I was shipped out. Paratroopers at Fort Benning opened crates and pulled out weapons their fathers might have carried in France. A double-edged blade, a heavy cast bronze handle shaped like brass knuckles, finger guards for every digit, and a spiked pommel meant to stun an enemy if the blade failed. It was long, heavy, and intimidating, almost medieval in appearance. But appearance was deceiving. A young private from the 82nd Airborne tested his issued Mark I. The bronze felt cold and slick. The finger holes did not quite fit his hand. Alternate grips were impossible. The knuckle guard allowed only one way to hold it. He asked his sergeant how he was supposed to carry it. The sergeant shrugged. He would figure it out. The Mark I had been designed in June 1918 by a panel of American Expedition Force officers seeking the ultimate close-quarters weapon, something that could stab, slash, and punch. On paper, it was formidable. In practice, it was deeply flawed. In the summer of 1942 at Fort Bragg, a Ranger lieutenant tested the knife against a training dummy. The thrust worked well. Slashing strikes felt awkward, the balance thrown off by the handle. An alternate grip was impossible. Punching with the brass knuckles offered no control. The smooth bronze caused the fist to slide. Similar reports poured in from Rangers training in Tennessee, paratroopers preparing for North Africa, and Marine raiders on the West Coast. The verdict was consistent. The Mark I looked terrifying but fought poorly. The brass knuckle design meant to protect the hand and add power, instead restricted movement and reduced effectiveness.
There was also the issue of cost. In January 1943, an economist briefed the War Production Board. Each Mark I required several ounces of cast bronze. At the production rate of 15,000 knives per month, that meant thousands of pounds of strategic metal urgently needed for shell casings, electrical systems, and aircraft components. Manufacturing was slow and complex. Each handle had to be cast, machined, and chemically blackened. Labor time averaged 2 hours per knife. Cost per unit ranged from $8 to $12. The board faced a hard reality. The military needed 2 million fighting knives by the end of 1944. That meant enormous expense and a dangerous drain on critical materials. The question was unavoidable. What was the alternative? The answer would be simplicity.
A carbon steel blade, a handle made from stacked leather washers shaped on a lathe. A simple steel crossguard, no brass, no casting, no strategic materials beyond steel. Production time per knife? Under 30 minutes. Estimated cost? Roughly $3. The room falls silent as the chairman does the math. $3 instead of 10. Millions saved. Production increased several times over. Faster output, fewer materials, no bottlenecks. He nods. Proceed, but it has to work. Issue it to Rangers and paratroopers first. If they approve it, full-scale production follows. In March 1943, the U.S. Army Ordnance Department officially approves the M3 fighting knife. The design is almost aggressively simple. A 6.75-inch spear point blade, bayonet style. Carbon steel with a blued or parkerized finish. A sharpened secondary edge along the false spine, allowing effective backhand slashing. A leather-stacked handle with multiple grooves, 8 on the standard pattern, though variations appear depending on the manufacturer. An angular steel crossguard with a bent thumb rest. A steel pommel cap. The total weight is barely over 7 ounces, less than a third of the old Mark I. In the formal description submitted to the War Production Board, the statement that the M3 trench knife was developed to meet the demands of modern hand-to-hand combat. While intended for troops not issued bayonets, it was specifically designed for shock units such as Rangers and Airborne forces. Contracts are awarded to 9 companies across the country. Each stamps its mark discreetly onto the knife. Production begins immediately. 50,000 are completed by April, 100,000 by May. By June, output is sufficient to equip virtually every airborne soldier preparing for the invasion of Europe. At Fort Benning in April 1943, the first crates arrive. A master sergeant from the 101st Airborne pries one open and lifts a knife from the packing. It feels light in his hand, almost shockingly so compared to the Mark I. He examines the blade. Double-edged, narrow, sharp. He grips the handle. The leather washers fit naturally, warm and secure, offering traction even when damp. He tries different grips, forward, reverse, ice pick, saber. Every position works. The simple guard never interferes. Transitions are instant. The balance is near perfect, the narrow blade keeping weight forward without becoming unwieldy. He tests it against a wooden post. The blade sinks in deep. He withdraws and slashes through a suspended canvas target with ease. He switches to a reverse grip and repeats the test. Same result. After dozens of strikes, the blade shows no cracks, no chips, no bending, only surface wear on the parkerized finish. In his evaluation, the sergeant writes that the M3 outperforms the Mark I in every measurable category. Weight, balance, versatility all point to immediate widespread issue. Across the United States, 9 factories now operate around the clock. Workers stack leather washers onto steel tangs, machinists shape the handles, grinders sharpen blades, inspectors check each finished knife. The process is streamlined, efficient, and fast. A skilled worker can complete an M3 in 20 to 30 minutes, compared to the hours required for the complex casting and machining of the Mark I. By the summer of 1943, production reaches 200,000 knives per month. The M3 becomes the most widely issued fighting knife in the American military. But the true test does not come on the training ground, it comes in combat. Sicily, July 10, 1943, Operation Husky.
In the early hours before dawn, paratroopers of the 92nd Airborne descend into darkness over the Italian countryside. High winds, anti-aircraft fire, and scattered drop zones leave many soldiers miles from their objectives. In fields and olive groves across Sicily, American paratroopers find themselves exactly where the M3 was meant to be used, isolated, behind enemy lines, carrying only what they landed with. One lieutenant from the 505th Paratrooper Infantry Regiment crashes into an olive grove. His parachute snags in the branches, leaving him hanging 10 feet above the ground. He cannot reach his release. The trunk is too far away. The branches are too thick to break. Voices carry through the night, enemy patrols drawing closer. He reaches down to his right boot and draws the M3 from its leather sheath. The blade catches the moonlight as he saws through the suspension lines. The double-edged steel slices cleanly through nylon. One line, then another. The canopy loosens and collapses. He drops, rolls, and comes up with the knife still in his hand. Flashlights sweep through the trees nearby. He has no rifle, it was lost during the drop. He has a .45 pistol, 2 magazines, a few grenades, and the knife. Accounts from Sicily repeat scenes like this again and again. Paratroopers cut off from their units, moving alone or in small groups, relying on silence and speed. In close quarters, where rifles were too long and pistols too loud, the M3 proved its value. It freed soldiers from dangerous positions, allowed them to move unseen through enemy territory, and gave them a reliable weapon when the fight came down to arm's length.
At just 7 ounces, the knife was so light that most soldiers barely noticed it strapped to a boot or hanging from a belt. Its stripped-down construction meant it kept working after hard landings, river crossings, and days of continuous field use. Stories like this surfaced again and again, first in Sicily, then Italy, then France. The M3 quietly became the preferred weapon of airborne troops operating deep behind enemy lines. It was light enough to carry without fatigue, balanced enough to use in any grip, sharp enough to slice through parachute lines, rope, canvas, leather, or flesh. It was also strong enough to pry open crates or force doors, even though ordnance officers continued filing reports about damaged blades when soldiers pushed the knife beyond its intended role. Normandy, June 6, 1944. Early morning hours. Another C-47 crosses the English Channel, the same type of paratrooper, the same M3 strapped to his boot. This time he is part of a Pathfinder team from the 101st Airborne, jumping in ahead of the main force to mark drop zones. The aircraft shudders as flak bursts nearby. Red light over the door. Stand up, hook up. The line shuffles forward. Green light, go. He steps into darkness from 12,000 feet. Cold air, tracer fire reaching upward. The parachute opens and he steers toward the ground. The landing is violent. Instead of a field, he hits a tree. The parachute catches. He is hanging again. Enemy voices nearby, closer than before. He reaches for his boot, draws the M3 and cuts himself free in seconds. He drops, rolls, and comes up ready. The knife slips back into its sheath. He slings his M1 Garand and moves toward the rally point. Hours later, inside a barn near Sainte-Mère-Église, he and 2 other Pathfinders are setting up a Eureka beacon. The barn door opens. A figure fills the doorway. Enemy uniform, rifle in hand. There is no time to shoulder the Garand. Too close, too fast. He lets the rifle fall, steps forward, and draws the M3 in a single motion. The knife does exactly what it was designed to do. By morning, more than 13,000 American paratroopers are scattered across Normandy. Nearly all of them carry M3 knives, some on boots, some on pistol belts, some tucked into webbing. The knife becomes as essential as ammunition. More than a weapon, it is a tool, a last resort, a guarantee. If the rifle jams, if the pistol runs dry, if grenades are gone, the M3 remains. 7 ounces of carbon steel, silent, dependable, lethal. Across Europe and the Pacific, the M3 earns its reputation. Rangers carry it in Italy,
Paratroopers take it into Holland during market garden. Tank crews keep it for close quarters defense if their vehicle is knocked out. Combat engineers use it to cut wire, strip insulation, and open crates. Army Air Forces crews carry it as a survival knife. In 1943, the British Special Air Service makes an unusual choice. SAS troopers are officially issued the Fairbairn Sykes dagger, a legendary blade designed for silent killing. Elegant, perfectly balanced, and famous, but whenever possible, SAS operators trade them for American M3s. The reason is simple: the M3 is tougher. Its blade is less likely to snap during rough use. The leather handle offers better grip in wet conditions. The simple steel guard provides more protection. The Fairbairn Sykes is a precision instrument. The M3 is a combat tool. Special operations soldiers favor tools that survive abuse. By August 1944, production peaks. More than 2.5 million M3 knives have been manufactured, more than any other American fighting knife of the war, more than the K-bar, more than any bayonet variant. The M3 is everywhere. Then production abruptly ends. In August 1944, a War Department memorandum circulates. Effective immediately, manufacture of the M3 trench knife will cease. The knife will be replaced by the M4 bayonet for the M1 carbine, which incorporates the M3 blade design and can serve as both bayonet and fighting knife. From a logistical standpoint, the decision makes sense. One blade, two rolls. For the soldiers carrying M3s, nothing changes. The knife still cuts, still opens crates, still eliminates threats. The M3 remains in service long after production stops. In Korea, in 1950, American forces rushed to defend South Korea, many units equipped with leftover World War II gear. Among it are M3 knives, 7-year-old blades, leather handles worn smooth, finishes scratched and faded, all of them still doing exactly what they were built to do.
Paratroopers of the 187th Airborne Regimental Combat Team carry it on combat jumps. Rangers take it on raids. The M3 proves just as effective in the frozen mountains of Korea as it once was in the hedgerows of France. By 1965, in Vietnam, the M3 is already 22 years old. Most have been replaced by newer bayonets and modern fighting knives, but some remain in service, and some soldiers ask for them by name. Tunnel rats, men tasked with crawling into Viet Cong underground tunnel systems, often prefer the M3 over newer designs. Its narrow blade is ideal in tight spaces. The double edge works in any grip. The simple construction means there is very little to fail in darkness, mud, and confined underground passages. The M3 continues to see use into the early 1970s, more than 3 decades of service, stretching from the fields of Sicily to the jungles of Southeast Asia, from paratroopers in Normandy to tunnel rats in Quang Tri. A knife that cost roughly $3 to make, originally intended as a disposable wartime shortcut, becomes one of the longest-serving American fighting knives ever issued. Today, original M3 trench knives are sought-after collector pieces. Early 1943 blade-marked examples sell for hundreds, sometimes well over $1,000. Later guard-marked versions still command strong prices. Museums across the United States display M3s in their World War II exhibits. Each one represents more than a weapon. It stands as proof of American industrial efficiency and the idea that the simplest solution is often the most effective. The influence of the M3 extends far beyond its own service life. Its blade design carries forward into nearly every American bayonet that follows: the M4 for the M1 carbine, the M5 for the M1 Garand, the M6 for the M14, the M7 for the M16. All borrow from the knife designed in 1943, the narrow spear point, the partial false edge, the uncomplicated crossguard. The M3's DNA runs through more than 70 years of American-edged weapons, but its true legacy isn't found in museums or private collections. It lives in the soldiers who carried it. The paratrooper who cut himself free from a tree in Normandy, the ranger who moved silently through Sicily, the tank crewman who defended himself in the Ardennes, the tunnel rat who survived underground in Vietnam. Every one of them relied on a knife that cost the U.S. Army only a few dollars to produce. 7 ounces of carbon steel and stacked leather. No decoration, no complexity, just ruthless efficiency. The Mark I trench knife that the M3 replaced looked fearsome, heavy, medieval, intimidating, but it was expensive, awkward, and difficult to produce. The M3 was the opposite: cheap, light, versatile. The Mark I was designed by committees to be perfect. The M3 was designed by necessity to be practical. One faded into history, the other became a legend. Sometimes the best weapon is not the most advanced. Sometimes it is the one that works when everything else fails. Light enough to carry without noticing, simple enough to maintain anywhere, reliable enough to trust with your life. The M3 trench knife was all of those things, a $3 answer to $1 million problem. Among all the knives issued to American troops in World War II, the M3 earned its reputation not through innovation or complexity, but through brutal simplicity. More than 2.5 million produced, 30 years of service, 5 major conflicts, countless lives depending on 7 ounces of American steel. All because someone asked a simple question: what if we just made it simpler? That is the story of the M3 trench knife, the knife nobody wanted, the blade everyone needed. A weapon that cost almost nothing and proved that in war, simplicity and reliability defeat sophistication every time.